When a heartless HOA president replaced my sick daughter's oxygen tank with a helium balloon, claiming her medical gear ruined the neighborhood's look, she didn't know I was a state attorney. Her ignorance nearly cost a child's life. What followed wasn't just justice, it became a landmark fight for compassion and disability rights. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun filtered through our kitchen window as I watched my 7-year-old daughter Emma sitting at the breakfast table, her small fingers wrapped around a cup of orange juice. The clear plastic tube running from her portable oxygen concentrator to her nose had become as natural a part of her as her bright blue eyes and infectious smile. Emma was born with a rare lung condition called pulmonary arterial hypertension that made every breath a conscious effort. For 5 years, we'd battled countless hospital visits, sleepless nights filled with the sound of her labored breathing, and the constant fear that gripped my heart every time she struggled for air. The doctors had explained that her lungs couldn't process oxygen efficiently, making the concentrator not just helpful, but absolutely essential for her survival. But Emma? She never complained. Despite the tubes and machines that surrounded her daily life, she painted rainbows on everything she could find, collected stickers from every doctor's visit like trophies, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian who would help sick puppies get better. Her resilience amazed everyone who met her. "Daddy, can I play outside today?" she asked, her voice soft but hopeful, the way it always sounded when filtered through the constant flow of supplemental oxygen. "Of course, sweetheart. Just stay in our backyard where I can see you, okay?" Our neighborhood, Willowbrook Estates, had strict HOA rules that governed everything from mailbox colors to lawn height. As a state attorney, I understood the importance of community regulations and property values, but I also knew when they crossed the line into harassment. What I didn't know was that our HOA president, Margaret Thornfield, had been watching our house with growing irritation for months. Margaret was the kind of woman who measured her grass with an actual ruler every Saturday morning and filed formal complaints if your mailbox wasn't the exact approved shade of midnight black. She'd lived in Willowbrook Estates for 15 years and treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, complete with subjects who needed constant supervision and correction. I'd had run-ins with Margaret before. She'd cited us for Emma's medical equipment being visible from the street, despite the fact that it was barely noticeable on our back porch. She'd complained about the delivery trucks that brought Emma's medical supplies, claiming they disrupted the peaceful ambience of the community. Each time, I'd politely reminded her that the Americans with Disabilities Act protected our right to necessary medical accommodations, but Margaret seemed to view this as a personal challenge to her authority. That Tuesday afternoon, I was in my home office reviewing case files for an upcoming trial when I heard Emma's panicked voice piercing through the quiet neighborhood air. "Daddy? Daddy, help. Please help me." The terror in her voice sent me running. I burst through the back door to find Emma sitting on her favorite purple swing, tears streaming down her face, her small body shaking as she clutched a bright red helium balloon. Her portable oxygen concentrator, the machine that had been her constant companion for years, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's your oxygen tank, baby? What happened to your helper machine?" Emma's words came out in gasping sobs that made my blood run cold. "The mean lady took it. She came into our yard and said I was being dramatic and didn't really need it. She gave me this balloon instead and said it has the same air inside." My world stopped. Without her oxygen concentrator, Emma's condition could become life-threatening within hours. Her lung capacity was so compromised that even mild exertion without supplemental oxygen could send her into respiratory failure. "Which lady, Emma? Where did she go?" "Think carefully, sweetheart." Emma pointed with a trembling finger toward the HOA office at the main entrance of our community. She had a mean face and kept saying our yard looked messy. She said the machine was ugly and made the neighborhood look like a hospital. I scooped Emma into my arms, feeling how her breathing was already becoming more labored. Racing inside, I grabbed one of our backup oxygen tanks from the medical supply closet and quickly connected the familiar tubing to Emma's nose. As the oxygen began flowing, I watched her breathing slowly stabilize, but I could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. "I'm scared, Daddy. Why did she take my helper machine?" I told her I needed it to breathe, but she said I was lying. The drive to the HOA office took less than 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. Emma sat beside me, connected to the portable tank, still clutching that red balloon like evidence of what had happened to her. Margaret Thornfield sat behind her mahogany desk like a queen holding court, surrounded by neighborhood violation notices, perfectly organized files, and a large banner that read, "Maintaining Excellence in Community Living." She looked up with barely concealed annoyance when I burst through the door, Emma in my arms. Mr. Davidson, I'm glad you're here. I hope you're finally ready to discuss your daughter's medical equipment situation. It's been creating quite an eyesore in our community for far too long. You took my daughter's oxygen tank? My voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of tone I used in court when I was about to destroy a witness's credibility. Margaret adjusted her glasses and straightened her blazer, clearly prepared for this confrontation. I confiscated inappropriate equipment that violates our community standards. That noisy machine was disrupting the aesthetic harmony of our neighborhood. Section 4.2 of the homeowner's agreement clearly states that all medical equipment must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Board. I stared at her in disbelief, struggling to process what I was hearing. Mrs. Thornfield, my daughter has pulmonary arterial hypertension. She needs that oxygen concentrator to breathe. Without it, she could die. Margaret waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away an annoying fly. Children are naturally dramatic about everything, Mr. Davidson. A little fresh air and exercise will do her more good than being dependent on machines. Besides, I provided a perfectly suitable replacement that's much more aesthetically pleasing. She gestured proudly toward Emma's confiscated oxygen concentrator, which sat in the corner of her office like seized contraband. Next to it was a bouquet of colorful helium balloons, apparently her solution to the neighborhood's medical equipment problem. That balloon you gave her? It's filled with helium. Do you have any idea what would happen if she had tried to breathe from it? For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Margaret's face. Well, it's still air, isn't it? Gas is gas. The ignorance was absolutely staggering. Helium displaces oxygen, Mrs. Thornfield. If my daughter had tried to breathe from that balloon, it could have suffocated her. You nearly killed a 7-year-old child because you thought her life-saving medical equipment was unsightly. I connected Emma to her backup oxygen tank, watching as her breathing slowly returned to normal. Her small hand squeezed mine as she whispered, "I was so scared, Daddy. I thought I was going to die like the goldfish did when we forgot to clean his bowl." "I know, baby. Everything's going to be okay now. This lady made a very big mistake, and Daddy's going to make sure she never hurts anyone like this again." But it wasn't okay. As I looked at my daughter's pale face and listened to her still labored breathing, something fundamental shifted inside me. This wasn't just about HOA overreach anymore. This was about a woman who had endangered my child's life out of petty spite, willful ignorance, and a complete disregard for human decency. Margaret must have sensed the change in the atmosphere because she quickly tried to backtrack. "Now, Mr. Davidson, I'm sure we can reach some sort of reasonable compromise here. Perhaps we could discuss relocating the equipment to a less visible location." "There will be no compromise." My prosecutor's voice emerged, cold and precise as a surgical instrument. "You endangered a child's life today. You entered private property, confiscated life-sustaining medical equipment from a 7-year-old girl, and replaced it with something that could have killed her. Now see here, I had no way of knowing the extent of her supposed condition. You had no way of knowing because you didn't bother to ask. You didn't bother to read the medical documentation we submitted to the HOA board 3 years ago when we moved here. You saw a child with medical equipment and decided it was inconvenient for your aesthetic preferences, so you took it upon yourself to play doctor. I pulled out my phone and called 911, requesting paramedics to evaluate Emma and document her condition. Then I called my colleague Sarah Martinez in the district attorney's office. Margaret's face grew progressively paler with each phone call she overheard. "Hi Sarah, it's David. I need to report a case of child endangerment." "Yes, against an HOA president?" "No, I'm not kidding." The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, their presence immediately filling the small HOA office. As they checked Emma's oxygen levels and vital signs, I watched Margaret begin to realize that this situation wasn't going to be handled with a simple apology and a promise to do better. "Mr. Davidson, surely we can handle this matter within our community guidelines. There's no need to involve outside authorities in what amounts to a simple misunderstanding." "Mrs. Thornfield, let me ask you something. Do you know what I do for a living?" She shook her head, though something in her expression suggested she was beginning to understand that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. "I'm a state attorney. For the past 12 years, I've specialized in prosecuting people who endanger children. I've sent people to prison for much less than what you did to my daughter today." The color drained completely from Margaret's face as the full implications of her actions began to sink in. The paramedic treating Emma looked up from his equipment. "Sir, your daughter's oxygen saturation levels are dangerously low. Without her concentrator, she could have gone into respiratory distress within the hour. Whoever removed this equipment could have killed her. Over the following days, the story spread through our community like wildfire. Neighbors who had quietly endured Margaret's tyrannical rule for years suddenly found their voices and began sharing their own horror stories. They formed a line outside my door, each person carrying documentation of harassment, unreasonable fines, and petty cruelties that had made their lives miserable under Margaret's reign. Mrs. Chun from Maple Street came forward with a thick folder documenting how Margaret had tried to ban her son's wheelchair ramp because it disrupted the uniform appearance of the sidewalk aesthetic. The Rodriguez family shared how they'd been fined $500 repeatedly for their daughter's medical alert service dog being off-leash in their own fenced backyard. An elderly veteran named Frank Morrison showed me citations he'd received for his oxygen tank being visible through his living room window. The local news picked up the story within 48 hours. HOA president removes child's oxygen tank, replaces with potentially fatal helium balloon, became the headline that sparked outrage across the entire state. The story went viral on social media, with people sharing their own HOA horror stories and demanding accountability. I filed formal criminal charges: child endangerment in the first degree, reckless conduct, criminal trespass, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Margaret hired the most expensive defense attorney money could buy, but the evidence against her was overwhelming and undeniable. During the trial, Emma testified with a courage that simultaneously broke my heart and filled me with enormous pride. When the prosecutor asked her to describe what happened that day, she spoke in her small, clear voice about being scared and unable to breathe, about not understanding why the mean lady had taken away her helper machine that kept her alive. I tried to tell her that I needed it to breathe because my lungs don't work right, Emma said, looking directly at Margaret across the courtroom. But she said I was just pretending and being a drama queen. She said sick kids make the neighborhood look bad. The courtroom was completely silent except for the soft sound of people crying and the quiet hum of Emma's oxygen concentrator. Margaret's high-powered lawyer tried desperately to argue that it was all a tragic misunderstanding, that his client had acted with good intentions and simply made an error in judgment. But the prosecutor methodically laid out the damning facts. Margaret had been repeatedly informed about Emma's condition through formal medical documentation submitted to the HOA board. She had received multiple letters from Emma's pulmonologist explaining the absolute necessity of the oxygen equipment. She had been provided with legal briefs about disability accommodation requirements. She had chosen to ignore all of it. The most devastating evidence was the recording from my phone during our confrontation at the HOA office. Margaret's dismissive attitude toward Emma's medical needs, her belief that children were naturally dramatic, and her shocking admission that she hadn't bothered to research what helium could do to a child who tried to breathe it painted a picture of willful negligence that bordered on malice. Margaret was convicted on all counts. She received 2 years in state prison, 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay $50,000 in fines plus all of Emma's medical expenses. The HOA board immediately removed her from her position and issued a formal public apology to our family and the entire community. But the real victory came 6 months later, when Emma ran up to me after school, breathless with excitement rather than medical distress. "Daddy, guess what happened today? I got picked to be the special class pet helper. Mrs. Johnson said I'm really good at taking care of things that need extra attention and love." She was still connected to her oxygen concentrator, the clear tubing as much a part of her daily life as her sparkly backpack and Princess Elsa lunchbox. But she wore it with pride now, like a badge of honor that showed the world she was brave enough to face each day despite the challenges that tried to hold her back. The neighborhood transformed completely. The new HOA board implemented comprehensive policies protecting residents with medical needs and disabilities. They established a community support fund to help families dealing with medical challenges and created a neighborhood network where children with chronic illnesses could connect and support each other. Emma started a little club called the Super Helpers, where kids in our neighborhood would visit elderly residents and assist with small tasks like watering plants or reading stories. She'd arrive at each house with her oxygen tank decorated with colorful stickers, rolling along in a bright pink wagon, teaching other children that being different didn't mean being less capable of spreading kindness and joy. One evening, as I tucked Emma into bed and adjusted her nighttime oxygen settings, she looked up at me with those bright blue eyes that had seen too much pain but remained absolutely full of wonder and hope. "Daddy, why did that mean lady want to hurt me so badly?" It was the question I'd been dreading for months, because the honest answer was too complex and heartbreaking for a 7-year-old to fully understand. How do you explain to a child that some people are so consumed by their need for control and perfection that they lose sight of basic human compassion and decency? "Sometimes, sweetheart, People get so worried about making things look perfect on the outside that they completely forget about what's really important on the inside, like making sure everyone feels safe, loved, and protected. Is that why you made sure she couldn't hurt other kids like me? Yes, baby. That's exactly why. It's my job to protect people, especially kids who need extra help. Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the wisdom that sick children often develop far too early. Then she smiled that brilliant smile that lit up every room she entered. I'm really glad you're my daddy. You're super good at protecting people and making sure the mean people can't hurt anyone anymore. As I watched her drift peacefully off to sleep, her small chest rising and falling steadily with the help of her faithful oxygen concentrator, I realized that Margaret Thornfield had inadvertently given us something incredibly precious. She'd shown Emma that there would always be people in the world who didn't understand her condition or appreciate her strength, but she'd also proven that there were many more people who would fight fiercely to protect her and ensure she could live her life with dignity and joy. The case became a landmark precedent in HOA law, frequently cited in legal textbooks as a definitive example of when community regulations cross the line into discrimination and life-threatening endangerment. Law schools across the country now use it to teach students about the critical intersection of disability rights, property law, and basic human decency. But for me, it will always be about a brave little girl who refused to let anyone make her feel ashamed of needing help to breathe, and who turned her traumatic experience into a beautiful mission to help others facing their own challenges. Emma is 10 years old now, still dreams every day of becoming a veterinarian who specializes in helping sick animals get better, and has never met a challenge she couldn't face with incredible courage and boundless compassion. Her trusty oxygen concentrator sits beside her desk as she does her homework each evening, serving as a reminder not of limitation or weakness, but of the extraordinary strength it takes to live fully and joyfully despite seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And sometimes, when I watch her patiently helping a struggling classmate with math problems or gently comforting a friend who's having a bad day, I think about how Margaret Thornfield's shocking cruelty inadvertently revealed Emma's truly extraordinary capacity for kindness, empathy, and resilience. It serves as a powerful reminder that even in our darkest, most frightening moments, we always have the power to choose who we become and how we respond to the challenges life throws our way. True justice isn't always about punishment and revenge. Sometimes it's about creating a better world where every child can breathe freely, dream boldly without limits, and know with absolute certainty that they are surrounded by people who understand that love, compassion, and basic human decency will always be infinitely more important than perfectly manicured lawns and pristine neighborhood aesthetics.